He had everything: wealth, power, and a reputation that could open any door. But behind closed doors, he wanted answers to a question money couldn't buy. Could he trust the one person who cared for his home and for him? So he made a choice. For 1 week, he would pretend to be blind. No warnings, no hints, just silence, darkness, and vulnerability. What happened in those 7 days would reveal far more than he expected. Because sometimes the truth about loyalty comes when you can't see it. And in this case, the truth would change everything. It was a life most people could only dream of. Daniel Whitmore, a self-made millionaire, lived in a sprawling mansion on the edge of the city. His days were filled with business calls, charity dinners, and the quiet comfort of knowing every detail of his home ran smoothly, thanks to Evelyn, his nanny and housekeeper for the past 4 years. She was in her early 40s, calm-spoken, and carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered more storms than she ever spoke about. To Daniel, she wasn't just an employee. She had cared for his late mother during her final illness, stayed through the long nights, and never once asked for extra pay. Yet lately, a thought had taken root in his mind. What if her kindness was only as deep as the benefits his wealth provided? What if, without the influence of his power and position, her attitude would change? It wasn't suspicion born from evidence. It was something deeper, an unsettling itch to know the truth about the people closest to him. That's when the idea came. He would step into the shoes of someone stripped of control, someone who had to rely completely on others. He would pretend to lose his sight. No one outside his private physician knew of the plan. Not the staff, not his friends. Only Evelyn's reaction would matter. For Daniel, it wasn't a game. It was a test. A test that, if failed, would alter the way he saw her forever, and maybe change his understanding of loyalty itself.
The first morning of the act felt strange. Daniel emerged from his bedroom with dark glasses on, his steps slow and uncertain. He told Evelyn in a soft, almost apologetic voice that an eye condition had suddenly robbed him of his vision. The doctor, he claimed, had warned him there was no immediate cure. Evelyn froze for a moment, her hands tightening on the tray she was carrying. "Oh, Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, but whether it was from genuine concern or shock at the news, Daniel couldn't yet tell. The first day passed with her guiding him gently through the hallways, describing where things were, reminding him where the furniture sat. But as the days wore on, subtle changes began to appear. Breakfast wasn't always on time. Her voice, once warm, became brisk. When she thought he was in another room, he heard her sigh, long, impatient sighs that cut through the silence. On the third evening, he sat in the study, pretending to nap in the armchair. Through the half-open door, he heard her speaking on the phone. "I don't know how long I can do this," she whispered. "It's exhausting. He doesn't even know how helpless he is without me." Daniel's heart sank. Was this the truth showing through, or just a moment of human frustration? He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the more he listened, the more small cracks seemed to appear. On the 5th day, something happened that shook him. He had left his wallet on the dining table, intentionally. That afternoon, he heard her footsteps pause near it. There was silence. Then the faint sound of leather against fabric. When he checked later, one of the credit cards was missing. By now, the air in the mansion felt different, colder, heavier. Evelyn still helped him, but the care felt mechanical, as if she were going through the motions she no longer wished to perform. Daniel kept his act going, even as doubt gnawed at him. Was this the same woman who had once sat up all night caring for his dying mother? Or had her kindness always been conditional? The final day of the test arrived with a storm raging outside. Rain lashed against the windows, wind howled through the trees. Daniel sat in the darkened lounge, waiting. Tonight he would end the act. Tonight he would confront whatever truth the week had uncovered. But he had no idea that the truth was far more complicated than the betrayal he feared, and it was about to unfold in the most unexpected way.
The storm outside roared like a warning, but Daniel's mind was louder. Every suspicion, every overheard word replayed in his head as he sat in the lounge. Evelyn entered quietly, a folded blanket in her arms. "You should rest," she said, placing it over him. Her tone was neutral, neither warm nor cold. He took a deep breath. "Evelyn, there's something you need to know." Slowly, he reached up and removed the dark glasses, meeting her eyes for the first time in a week. "I can see." She froze. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't speak. Daniel continued, his voice low but sharp. "This was a test. I needed to know the truth about you." Her eyes welled, but not with the guilt he expected. Instead, there was hurt. "A test?" she whispered. "You think kindness survives when you strip away someone's dignity? You think I wasn't tired? You think I didn't still take care of you every single day, even when you treated me like I wasn't worth honesty?" He blinked, caught off guard. "And the card? I know you took it." She reached into her apron and pulled it out, placing it on the table. "For groceries. The storm had knocked out the card reader on the house account. I meant to tell you tonight." The air between them grew heavy. All week, he had been searching for betrayal, and in doing so, he had planted the seeds of mistrust himself. She looked at him with a mixture of sadness and exhaustion. "I cared for you because of who you are, not what you have. But after this, I don't know if I can anymore." Daniel's chest tightened. The real test had not been hers to pass. It had been his, and he had failed. The storm outside began to ease, but inside, the damage was already done. Evelyn stood there, her face etched with disappointment, and Daniel realized that no amount of money, apologies, or explanations could erase the sting of his mistrust. He tried to speak, but the words came out hollow. "Evelyn, She shook her head gently. "I stayed through your mother's illness, through every late night and early morning, not because of your wealth, but because I believed you valued me as a person. This told me you don't." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He had convinced himself that the experiment was about finding truth, but in reality, it had been about feeding a quiet fear that loyalty in his world could only be bought. What he hadn't considered was how deeply the act of testing someone could break the very trust he wanted to measure. Evelyn left the room without another word. The next morning, her resignation letter sat neatly on the kitchen counter. No anger, no accusations, just a short note thanking him for the opportunity to work in his home. He never saw her again, but her absence stayed with him, a constant reminder that trust is fragile, far more fragile than wealth, power, or reputation. You can't measure it by stripping someone down to their breaking point. You can only nurture it, and once it's broken, it rarely returns. This wasn't just the loss of an employee, it was the loss of someone who had been family in all but name. And in a world full of masks and pretenses, Daniel learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes, the person you're testing isn't them, it's you. So, how many bonds do we destroy in the name of testing them, only to realize
They were real all along.